What if I told you that right now, at this very moment, you are not in control of your own mind? That your thoughts, your emotions, and even your decisions are being hijacked not by society, not by technology, not by other people, but by something far more dangerous. Your own unconscious mental programming. You think you're making choices freely, but the truth is most of what you do is dictated by habits, fears, and conditioned beliefs you never even chose for yourself. Every moment you hesitate, every goal you abandon, every self-doubt that creeps in, it's not because you're incapable. It's because your mind is running on autopilot, following a script that was written long before you ever realized it. And unless you take back control, it will continue to rule your life, making your choices for you. But here's the shocking part. You can reprogram your mind. You can rewrite that script. You can take full control of your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors to create the reality you actually want, not the one your unconscious fears and past experiences have trapped you in. The ability to train your mind is the difference between those who succeed and those who stay stuck in cycles of self-doubt, overthinking, and procrastination. And right now, you're about to learn how to master it. This is not about manipulation or controlling others. This is about mastering yourself. Because here's the truth. Every limitation in your life, every struggle, every frustration you've ever felt comes down to one thing: your ability to control your mind. If you can't control your focus, you'll always be distracted. If you can't control your emotions, you'll always be reactive. If you can't control your thoughts, you'll always be at war with yourself. Most people spend their entire lives as prisoners of their own mind. They don't even realize that the way they think is not a reflection of reality. It's just a set of conditioned patterns. That's why some people succeed against all odds, while others fail despite having every advantage. It's not about intelligence. It's not about talent. It's about mental discipline. Your mind is either your biggest weapon or your greatest weakness. And the difference is whether you control it or it controls you. Chapter 1. The Mind Control Secret. They never taught you. Let's get one thing straight from the beginning. Most people are completely unaware that they are not thinking their own thoughts. They believe they are conscious, aware, and in control. But in reality, they are operating on mental autopilot, running programs that were installed in their minds years ago without their permission. From the moment you were born, your subconscious mind has been recording everything. Every word spoken to you, every emotion you witnessed, every belief system you were exposed to, every pattern of behavior you observed. Your brain, acting like the ultimate recording device, absorbed it all and turned it into your mental operating system. By the time you reached adulthood, this mental programming was so deeply embedded that you began to mistake it for your own identity. But here's the shocking truth. Most of what you believe about yourself, about what's possible, about how the world works, is not actually yours. It's a collection of borrowed limitations that have been passed down through generations. If you were told as a child that you weren't smart enough, you likely internalized that belief, even if it was never true. If you grew up watching people struggle financially, your mind probably developed an unconscious association between money and hardship, leading you to unknowingly sabotage financial success. If your environment conditioned you to believe that taking risks leads to failure, your brain may instinctively avoid opportunities that could change your life. This is why two people can face the exact same situation and have completely different outcomes. It's not because one is more talented or lucky, it's because they have different mental programming. One person's mind tells them, "This is impossible," while the other's says, This is an opportunity. One sees obstacles, the other sees stepping stones. One focuses on what could go wrong, the other on what could go right. The people who achieve extraordinary success have learned to recognize this programming and consciously choose their thoughts instead of being controlled by them. They understand that their mind is not their master but their tool. And, like any tool, it must be trained, sharpened, and directed with intention. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think mind control means suppressing negative thoughts or forcing themselves to think positively. That's not control, that's resistance. True mental mastery comes from understanding how your mind works and learning to redirect its patterns in ways that serve your highest goals. Your brain is designed to keep you safe, not to make you successful. It's programmed to avoid pain, seek immediate pleasure, and conserve energy. These survival mechanisms served our ancestors well when they were avoiding predators. But in the modern world, they often work against us. Your brain will try to talk you out of taking risks, even when those risks could lead to massive rewards. It will crave instant gratification, even when delayed gratification would serve you better. It will seek comfort, even when growth requires discomfort. This is why willpower alone never works long-term. You're fighting against millions of years of evolutionary programming. But when you understand how this programming operates, you can work with it instead of against it. You can train your mind to associate pain with staying stuck and pleasure with taking action. You can rewire your neural pathways to default to empowering thoughts instead of limiting ones. You can reprogram your subconscious to support your goals instead of sabotaging them. The key is understanding that your mind is not fixed. It's not permanent. Every thought you think, every belief you hold, every pattern you follow exists as neural pathways in your brain. And here's the incredible part. These pathways can be changed. This is called neuroplasticity, and it's the scientific foundation of everything we're about to explore. Every time you consciously choose a different thought, you're literally rewiring your brain. Every time you act in spite of fear, you're weakening the neural pathways that create fear and strengthening the ones that create courage. Every time you focus on solutions instead of problems, you're training your mind to become a problem-solving machine instead of a problem-finding machine. But this process requires intention, consistency, and the right techniques. It requires you to become aware of your current programming, consciously choose new patterns, and practice them until they become automatic. It's not easy, but it's the most important work you'll ever do, because when you master your mind, you master your life. Chapter 2. Why your brain is sabotaging your success. Your brain is not designed to make you successful. It's designed to keep you alive. And there's a massive difference between survival and success. Understanding this fundamental conflict is the key to taking control of your mental programming and achieving the results you actually want. For millions of years, human survival depended on three basic principles: avoid danger, conserve energy, and seek immediate rewards. Our ancestors who were best at following these principles were the ones who lived long enough to pass on their genes. So over time, these survival mechanisms became hardwired into our neural circuitry. The problem is that what kept our ancestors alive is now keeping us stuck. In the modern world, the biggest dangers aren't physical threats that require split-second reactions. They're long-term consequences of poor decisions, missed opportunities, and unfulfilled potential. But your brain doesn't know this. It's still operating on ancient programming that treats every challenge as a potential threat to your survival. This is why your mind resists change. Even when you consciously know that change would benefit you. When you think about starting a business, your brain doesn't see opportunity. It sees risk, uncertainty, and potential failure. So it floods you with anxiety, self-doubt, and 1,000 reasons why you should stay in your comfort zone. When you consider taking on a challenging project, your brain doesn't see growth potential. It sees extra work, possible embarrassment, and the chance that you might not succeed. So it convinces you to play it safe, to stick with what you know, to avoid anything that might expose your limitations. This ancient programming manifests in 3 specific ways that sabotage modern success. First, your brain is wired to focus on problems and threats rather than opportunities and solutions. This is called the negativity bias. And it exists because noticing dangers was more important for survival than noticing opportunities. Our ancestors, who were constantly scanning for threats, were more likely to avoid being eaten by predators. But in today's world, this same mechanism causes you to focus on everything that could go wrong instead of everything that could go right. Second, your brain craves immediate gratification over long-term rewards. In a survival situation, it made sense to eat the food you found immediately rather than saving it for later. You never knew when you might find food again. But in the modern world, almost every meaningful achievement requires delayed gratification. Building a business takes years of investment before you see major returns. Getting in shape requires months of consistent effort before you see dramatic changes. Mastering a skill demands thousands of hours of practice before you reach expertise. Your brain doesn't understand this. It wants the reward now. So it tempts you with distractions, shortcuts, and instant pleasures that derail your long-term progress. It makes scrolling social media feel more appealing than working on your goals. It makes watching Netflix seem more attractive than reading books that could change your life. It makes buying things you don't need feel more satisfying than investing in things that could multiply your wealth. Third, your brain is designed to conserve energy by creating habits and mental shortcuts. This was efficient for survival because it allowed our ancestors to perform routine tasks without conscious thought, saving mental energy for dealing with unexpected threats. But in today's world, many of our automatic habits and thought patterns work against us. We automatically reach for our phones when we feel bored, even when we know it will waste hours. We automatically think negative thoughts when we face challenges, even when we know pessimism won't help. We automatically choose the path of least resistance, even when we know that growth requires effort. The most successful people have learned to recognize these patterns and consciously override them. They understand that their first instinct is often wrong in a modern context. When their brain says, "This is too risky," they ask, "What's the real downside? And what's the potential upside?" When their brain says, "I don't feel like doing this," they do it anyway, because they know that feelings are temporary, but results are permanent. When their brain offers them a distraction, they recognize it as a survival mechanism trying to conserve energy and consciously choose to stay focused on their priorities. But overriding these patterns requires more than just willpower. Willpower is a limited resource that gets depleted throughout the day. If you rely on willpower alone, you'll eventually give in to your brain's primitive programming. The key is to work with your brain's natural tendencies while redirecting them toward your goals. You can train your brain to associate pain with staying stuck and pleasure with taking action toward your goals. You can create environmental cues that make good choices easier and bad choices harder. You can develop systems and routines that align with your brain's desire for efficiency while moving you towards success instead of mediocrity. This is not about fighting against your nature. It's about understanding your nature and channeling it in directions that serve your highest aspirations. Your brain is incredibly powerful, but like any powerful tool, it needs to be used with skill and intention. When you learn to work with your brain instead of against it, you transform it from your greatest obstacle into your greatest asset. Chapter 3. The Neuroplasticity Revolution. How to physically rewire your brain for success. Here's something that will completely change how you think about your potential. Your brain is not fixed. The thoughts you think, the beliefs you hold, the patterns you follow, the habits you've developed, none of these are permanent. They all exist as neural pathways in your brain, and these pathways can be changed, strengthened, or completely rewired at any age. This discovery, called neuroplasticity, has revolutionized our understanding of human potential. For decades, scientists believed that the adult brain was essentially unchangeable. They thought you were stuck with whatever neural wiring you developed in childhood. But advanced brain imaging technology has proven this completely wrong. Your brain is constantly rewiring itself based on your thoughts, actions, and experiences. Every time you think a thought, electrical signals travel along specific neural pathways in your brain. The more often you think the same thought, the stronger those pathways become. It's literally like creating a path through a forest. The first time you walk through, you have to push through thick brush and overgrown vegetation. But if you walk the same route every day, eventually you create a clear, well-worn path that's easy to follow. This is exactly how habits, beliefs, and automatic thought patterns are formed. When you repeatedly think, "I'm not good enough," you're strengthening the neural pathways associated with self-doubt. When you consistently choose comfort over challenge, you're reinforcing the neural circuits that make you avoid difficult situations. When you habitually focus on problems instead of solutions, you're literally training your brain to become a problem-finding machine. But here's the incredible part. You can consciously choose to create new pathways. Every time you think a different thought, you're literally changing the physical structure of your brain. Every time you act in spite of fear, you're weakening the neural pathways that create fear and strengthening the ones that create courage. Every time you choose to focus on possibilities instead of limitations, you're rewiring your brain to become more optimistic and solution-oriented. The process works through 3 specific mechanisms. First, when you learn something new or think in a new way, your brain creates new neural connections. Scientists call this synaptogenesis. Second, when you practice new thoughts or behaviors consistently, your brain strengthens these connections by wrapping them in a substance called myelin, which makes the signals travel faster and more efficiently. Third, when you stop using old neural pathways, they gradually weaken and can even be eliminated entirely. This means that any limitation you currently experience in your thinking is not permanent. If you struggle with self-confidence, you can literally rewire your brain to default to confident thoughts. If you tend to procrastinate, you can create new neural pathways that make taking action feel natural and automatic. If you often feel overwhelmed or anxious, you can train your brain to respond to challenges with calm and clarity instead. But neuroplasticity doesn't happen automatically. Your brain will rewire itself based on whatever you feed it most consistently. If you spend your time consuming negative news, engaging in pessimistic conversations, and focusing on what's wrong with your life. Your brain will strengthen the neural pathways associated with negativity and pessimism. If you constantly expose yourself to distractions, your brain will become increasingly scattered and unfocused. If you regularly choose the easy path, your brain will become more resistant to effort and challenge. The key to harnessing neuroplasticity for success is conscious, consistent practice. You have to deliberately choose thoughts and actions that align with who you want to become, and you have to do this repeatedly until the new patterns become automatic. This is not about positive thinking or wishful thinking. This is about strategic thinking combined with consistent action. The most effective way to rewire your brain is through what neuroscientists call deliberate practice. This means consciously engaging in thoughts and behaviors that challenge your current limitations. If you want to develop confidence, you have to deliberately put yourself in situations that require confidence and practice thinking confident thoughts, even when you don't feel confident yet. If you want to become more disciplined, you have to deliberately choose difficult tasks and practice following through, even when you don't feel motivated. The process requires patience because neural rewiring takes time. Most people give up too quickly because they don't see immediate results. But neuroscience shows that significant changes in brain structure can occur in as little as 2 weeks of consistent practice, with more dramatic changes happening over several months. The key is consistency, not intensity. Small, daily actions that align with your desired mental patterns are more effective than occasional bursts of dramatic effort. You also have to be strategic about your environment because your surroundings significantly influence your neural development. If you want to develop an abundance mindset, surround yourself with people who think abundantly. If you want to become more disciplined, create an environment that makes discipline easier and distractions harder. If you want to develop expertise in a particular area, immerse yourself in that field as much as possible. Understanding neuroplasticity gives you incredible power over your future. It means that no matter where you are right now, no matter what limitations you currently experience, no matter what failures you've had in the past, you can literally rewire your brain to support the life you want to create. Your current reality is not your permanent reality. Your brain is waiting for you to give it new instructions. Chapter 4. The 4 Pillars of Mental Mastery. True mental control rests on 4 fundamental pillars. Most people try to change their lives by working on symptoms rather than root causes. They try to force themselves to be more disciplined without addressing the underlying thought patterns that create indiscipline. They try to build confidence without examining the beliefs that generate self-doubt. They try to improve their focus without understanding the mental habits that create distraction. This approach never works long-term because it doesn't address the foundation. It's like trying to build a skyscraper on quicksand. No matter how beautiful the structure, it will eventually collapse because the foundation cannot support it. Mental mastery requires building your psychological foundation on 4 unshakable pillars that support everything else you want to achieve. The first pillar is awareness. You cannot control what you are not aware of. Most people go through life completely unconscious of their thought patterns, emotional reactions, and behavioral habits. They react automatically to situations without ever examining why they react the way they do. They follow mental scripts that were written years ago without ever questioning whether those scripts serve their current goals. Developing awareness means becoming the observer of your own mind. It means stepping back from your thoughts and emotions to examine them objectively. Instead of being caught up in anxiety, you learn to notice, I am experiencing anxiety right now. Instead of being overwhelmed by anger, you observe, I am having angry thoughts. Instead of being controlled by fear, you recognize, fear is trying to influence my decision. This shift from being your emotions to observing your emotions is the foundation of all mental control. When you're caught up in an emotion, you have no choice but to be controlled by it. But when you can observe the emotion, you create space between yourself and the emotion. In that space lies your power to choose your response. The second pillar is acceptance. This might seem counterintuitive when talking about control, but acceptance is actually essential for true mastery. What you resist persists. When you fight against negative thoughts or emotions, you give them more power. When you judge yourself for having certain feelings, you create additional layers of negativity. When you try to suppress uncomfortable experiences, they often become stronger. Acceptance doesn't mean resignation or passivity. It means acknowledging what is true in the present moment without adding unnecessary resistance. It means recognizing that negative thoughts and emotions are natural parts of the human experience, not signs that something is wrong with you. It means understanding that discomfort is often a sign of growth, not a signal to retreat. When you accept your current mental state without judgment, you stop wasting energy fighting against it and can redirect that energy toward conscious change. When you accept that fear is present without judging yourself for feeling afraid, you can act courageously in spite of the fear. When you accept that you're feeling unmotivated without beating yourself up for it, you can choose to take action anyway. The third pillar is intention. Once you're aware of your mental patterns and have accepted your current state, you must consciously choose the direction you want to move. Most people drift through life without clear intentions for their mental development. They hope they'll become more confident, disciplined, or focused, but they never make specific decisions about how they want to think and feel. Setting clear intentions means defining exactly what mental qualities you want to develop and making conscious choices that support those qualities. If you intend to become more confident, you must consciously choose thoughts and actions that build confidence. If you intend to become more disciplined, you must deliberately practice discipline in small ways until it becomes natural. If you intend to become more focused, you must systematically eliminate distractions and strengthen your attention span. Intention without action is just wishful thinking, but action without intention is just random activity. The most successful people combine clear intentions with consistent actions that align with those intentions. They don't leave their mental development to chance. They consciously choose who they want to become, and then systematically develop the thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that support that identity. The fourth pillar is practice. Mental mastery is not a destination you reach. It's a practice you engage in daily. Just like physical fitness requires consistent exercise, mental fitness requires consistent mental training. You cannot develop lasting control over your mind through occasional bursts of effort. You must engage in daily practices that strengthen your mental muscles and reinforce positive patterns. The most effective mental practices are simple but profound. Daily meditation trains your ability to observe your thoughts without being controlled by them. Journaling helps you become aware of your mental patterns and track your progress. Visualization allows you to mentally rehearse successful outcomes and strengthen neural pathways associated with achievement. Affirmations help you consciously choose empowering beliefs instead of accepting limiting ones. But practice must be consistent to be effective. Sporadic efforts produce sporadic results. The people who achieve lasting mental transformation are those who commit to daily practices, even when they don't feel like it, even when progress seems slow, even when other priorities compete for their attention. These four pillars work together synergistically. Awareness without acceptance leads to self-judgment and resistance. Acceptance without intention leads to passivity and stagnation. Intention without practice leads to frustration and unfulfilled potential. Practice without awareness leads to unconscious repetition of old patterns. But when all four pillars are strong and working together, they create an unshakable foundation for mental mastery. You become aware of your current patterns without judging them. You accept where you are while clearly intending where you want to go. You practice consistently while staying aware of your progress and adjusting your approach as needed. Building these pillars takes time and patience, but the investment pays incredible dividends. When your mental foundation is solid, everything else becomes easier. Discipline feels natural because it aligns with your clear intentions. Confidence grows because you're consistently practicing confident thoughts and actions. Focus improves because you're aware of distractions and consciously choose to redirect your attention. Most importantly, you develop unshakable inner stability. External circumstances may change, challenges may arise, setbacks may occur, but your mental foundation remains solid. You know that you have the tools to handle whatever life throws at you because you've developed mastery over the one thing you can always control: your own mind. Chapter 5. Breaking the patterns that keep you stuck. Every person who remains stuck in life, regardless of their intelligence, resources, or opportunities, is trapped by the same thing: unconscious patterns. These patterns operate like invisible chains, limiting their potential while remaining completely hidden from their awareness. They go through the same mental routines, make the same types of decisions, and get the same unsatisfying results, all while wondering why their life never seems to change. Understanding and breaking these patterns is the difference between a life of constant struggle and a life of continuous growth. Most people never examine their patterns because they're too busy living inside them. They're like fish who don't realize they're swimming in water because water is all they've ever known. But the moment you can step outside your patterns and observe them objectively, you gain the power to change them. The first pattern that keeps people stuck is the pattern of reactive thinking. Instead of consciously choosing their thoughts, they allow their thoughts to be determined by external circumstances. When something good happens, they think positive thoughts. When something challenging occurs, they think negative thoughts. When they hear bad news, they worry. When they face uncertainty, they stress. When someone criticizes them, they doubt themselves. This reactive pattern puts them at the mercy of circumstances beyond their control. Their emotional state becomes dependent on factors they cannot influence: other people's opinions, economic conditions, political events, social media content, or random daily occurrences. They become like emotional ping-pong balls, bouncing between optimism and pessimism based on whatever is happening around them. Breaking this pattern requires developing what psychologists call an internal locus of control. This means recognizing that while you cannot control external circumstances, you can always control your response to those circumstances. You can choose to respond to challenges with curiosity instead of anxiety. You can choose to respond to criticism with self-reflection instead of defensiveness. You can choose to respond to uncertainty with excitement about possibilities, instead of fear about potential problems. The second pattern that creates stuckness is the pattern of perfectionist paralysis. These individuals set such impossibly high standards for themselves that they never take action. They want to start a business, but they won't begin until they have the perfect business plan. They want to create content, but they won't publish anything until it's absolutely flawless. They want to learn new skills, but they won't start until they're sure they can master them quickly. This pattern is actually a sophisticated form of self-sabotage. By demanding perfection, they give themselves a built-in excuse for never beginning. They can always tell themselves they're not ready yet. They need to do more research, or the timing isn't right. Meanwhile, people with lower standards but higher action orientation are achieving results and gaining experience. Breaking perfectionist paralysis requires embracing what successful entrepreneurs call minimum viable progress. Instead of waiting for perfect conditions, you start with good enough conditions and improve as you go. Instead of demanding flawless execution, you accept that learning comes through doing, not through planning. Instead of trying to avoid all mistakes, you recognize that mistakes are feedback that helps you improve. The third pattern is the pattern of external validation dependency. These individuals make their self-worth conditional on other people's approval. They choose careers based on what their family thinks is respectable rather than what they find fulfilling. They avoid taking risks because they're afraid of what people might say if they fail. They constantly seek reassurance from others instead of developing inner confidence. This pattern is particularly destructive because it puts your happiness and self-esteem in other people's hands. Since you cannot control other people's opinions, you become chronically anxious and insecure. You also tend to make safe, conventional choices that gain approval but don't lead to extraordinary results. Breaking this pattern requires developing what psychologists call internal validation. This means learning to approve of yourself based on your own values and standards rather than other people's expectations. It means making decisions based on what aligns with your authentic desires rather than what will gain the most social approval. It means measuring your worth by your character and effort rather than by external achievements or recognition. The fourth pattern is the pattern of comfortable limitation. These individuals have unconsciously defined a zone of familiar struggle that feels safer than the uncertainty of growth. They complain about their circumstances but resist taking the actions that would change those circumstances. They want better results but aren't willing to become the person who naturally creates better results. This pattern is maintained by what psychologists call secondary gains. The current situation, despite being unsatisfying, provides certain benefits that the person is reluctant to give up. Staying stuck might provide excuses for not taking responsibility. Remaining small might feel safer than risking failure at a higher level. Maintaining familiar problems might feel more comfortable than facing unfamiliar challenges. Breaking this pattern requires honest self-examination about what you're gaining from staying stuck. You must be willing to give up the familiar discomfort of your current situation for the unfamiliar discomfort of growth. You must choose the uncertainty of pursuing your potential over the certainty of remaining limited. The fifth pattern is the pattern of story-based identity. Everyone has stories they tell themselves about who they are, what they're capable of, and how the world works. These stories feel like absolute truth, but they're actually just interpretations of past experiences. People who remain stuck have stories that limit their possibilities. I'm not good with money. I'm not a natural leader. I don't have what it takes to succeed. These identity stories become self-fulfilling prophecies. If you believe you're not good with money, You won't invest time in learning financial principles. If you believe you're not a natural leader, you won't put yourself in positions that develop leadership skills. If you believe you don't have what it takes to succeed, you won't persist through the challenges that success requires. Breaking story-based limitations requires recognizing that your current identity is not your permanent identity. You are not your past experiences. You are not your current limitations. You are not your previous failures. You are a being with unlimited potential for growth and change. Every day, you have the opportunity to write a new chapter in your story. The key to breaking all these patterns is developing meta-awareness, awareness of your awareness. You must learn to observe your own thinking patterns, emotional reactions, and behavioral habits, as if you were a scientist studying an interesting subject. When you can see your patterns clearly, you can choose to engage them differently. This process requires patience and self-compassion. These patterns developed over years or decades, and they won't disappear overnight. But with consistent awareness and conscious choice, you can gradually replace limiting patterns with empowering ones. Every time you choose a different response, you're weakening old neural pathways and strengthening new ones. The people who achieve extraordinary success are not necessarily more talented or intelligent than those who remain stuck. They've simply learned to recognize and break the patterns that limit most people. They've developed the ability to act independently of their conditioning, to choose their responses consciously, and to persist through discomfort in service of their larger vision. Chapter 6. The Elite Mindset Switch. How top performers think differently. The difference between extraordinary achievers and everyone else isn't talent, luck, or circumstances. It's how they think. While most people operate with the same mental frameworks that keep them trapped in mediocrity, elite performers have developed completely different thought patterns that automatically generate superior results. Understanding these mental differences is crucial because your thinking determines everything else. Your thoughts create your emotions drive your actions, and your actions produce your results. If you want different results, you must first change how you think. But most people never examine their thinking patterns. They assume everyone thinks the same way they do, never realizing that their mental approach is what's limiting their potential. The first major difference is how elite performers process failure. Average people see failure as evidence of their limitations. When they don't succeed at something, they conclude that they're not good enough, smart enough, or talented enough. They take failure personally and use it as justification for giving up or playing smaller. They develop what psychologists call learned helplessness, where they stop trying because they believe their efforts won't make a difference. Elite performers see failure completely differently. They view failure as data, not as a reflection of their worth. When something doesn't work, they ask, "What can I learn from this?" instead of, "Why does this always happen to me?" They treat failures as experiments that provide valuable information about what doesn't work, bringing them closer to discovering what does work. They understand that failure is not the opposite of success. It's a prerequisite for success. This different relationship with failure allows elite performers to take risks that others won't take, persist when others quit, and ultimately achieve results that others consider impossible. They're not afraid of failing because they know that every failure teaches them something valuable. They're actually more afraid of not trying than they are of trying and failing. The second major difference is how they think about challenges. Average people see challenges as threats to their comfort and security. When faced with a difficult situation, their first instinct is to avoid it, minimize it, or find the easiest way through it. They want life to be easy and smooth, and they interpret difficulties as signs that something is wrong. Elite performers see challenges as opportunities for growth. They understand that easy tasks don't develop capabilities, overcome limitations, or create breakthroughs. They know that the biggest rewards come from solving the hardest problems, and they actively seek out challenges that will force them to expand their abilities. They don't run from discomfort. They run toward it because they know that's where transformation happens. This mindset difference explains why elite performers often accomplish more in a few years than most people accomplish in decades. While others are avoiding challenges, they're actively pursuing the most difficult and rewarding opportunities. While others are seeking comfort, they're deliberately placing themselves in uncomfortable situations that force rapid growth. The third difference is how they think about time. Average people think in terms of immediate results and short-term gratification. They want to see progress quickly, and they get discouraged when results don't come fast. They make decisions based on what feels good right now rather than what will create the best long-term outcomes. They're constantly looking for shortcuts, quick fixes, and instant solutions. Elite performers think in decades, not days. They make decisions based on where they want to be years from now, not how they feel in the moment. They're willing to invest time and energy in activities that may not pay off immediately, but will compound over time into extraordinary results. They understand that meaningful achievement requires sustained effort over extended periods, and they're willing to delay gratification for superior long-term outcomes. This long-term thinking allows them to make investments that others won't make. They'll spend years developing skills that others consider too time-consuming. They'll build relationships that others consider too slow to develop. They'll work on projects that others consider too risky or too uncertain. But over time, these investments compound into massive advantages. The fourth difference is how they think about resources. Average people focus on what they lack. They tell themselves they can't pursue their goals because they don't have enough money, time, connections, or experience. They wait for perfect conditions before taking action, and they use resource limitations as excuses for not beginning. Elite performers focus on what they can do with what they have. Instead of waiting for ideal conditions, they start with current resources and figure out how to maximize them. Instead of focusing on limitations, they focus on possibilities. They understand that resourcefulness is more important than resources, and they develop the ability to create solutions with whatever is available. This resourcefulness mindset leads to breakthrough thinking. When others see obstacles, they see creative opportunities. When others see limitations, they see puzzles to solve. When others see reasons why something can't be done, they see ways to make it happen anyway. The fifth difference is how they think about other people's success. Average people often feel threatened by others' achievements. They compare themselves to successful people and feel inadequate. They sometimes even hope that successful people will fail because it makes them feel better about their own limitations. They see success as a limited resource where someone else's gain means their loss. Elite performers are inspired by others' success. They study successful people to understand what they're doing differently. They seek mentors who have achieved what they want to achieve. They celebrate others' victories because they understand that success is not a zero-sum game. One person's success doesn't diminish their own potential. It proves that high achievement is possible. This collaborative mindset leads to accelerated learning and better opportunities. Elite performers build networks of other high achievers who support each other's growth. They learn from people who are ahead of them instead of avoiding them out of insecurity. They position themselves around success instead of hiding from it. The sixth difference is how they think about their own potential. Average people have fixed beliefs about their capabilities. They think they're good at certain things and bad at others, and they don't expect this to change significantly. They avoid activities that might expose their weaknesses, and they stick to areas where they already feel competent. Elite performers have what psychologist Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset. They believe their abilities can be developed through effort, learning, and persistence. They don't see their current limitations as permanent constraints. They understand that expertise is created, not born, and they're willing to be beginners in new areas because they know they can develop mastery over time. This growth mindset leads to continuous expansion of capabilities. While others are staying within their existing comfort zones, elite performers are constantly developing new skills, exploring new territories, and pushing the boundaries of what they thought possible. The most important thing to understand is that these thinking patterns are not innate personality traits. They're learned mental habits that anyone can develop. Elite performers weren't born thinking this way. They developed these patterns through conscious choice and consistent practice. Every thought pattern that creates extraordinary results can be learned, practiced, and mastered. The key is recognizing that changing your thinking is not about forcing yourself to think positively or suppressing negative thoughts. It's about consciously choosing thought patterns that serve your goals and practicing them until they become automatic. It's about developing the mental habits that naturally lead to the results you want to create. Chapter 7. Destroying Self-Doubt, the Ultimate Confidence System. Self-doubt is the silent killer of dreams. It's the voice in your head that whispers, "You're not good enough," when you're about to take action. It's the feeling in your gut that says, "Who are you to think you can do this?" when you're considering a bold move. It's the mental weight that makes you hesitate, second-guess yourself, and ultimately stay stuck in situations that don't serve your potential. Most people think self-doubt is just a natural part of life. They accept it as an unchangeable aspect of their personality. They believe some people are born confident and others aren't, and there's nothing they can do about it. But this is completely wrong. Self-doubt is not a personality trait. It's a learned pattern. And anything that's learned can be unlearned and replaced with something better. Understanding where self-doubt comes from is the first step to eliminating it. Self-doubt is created by 3 specific mental processes that most people engage in unconsciously. The first process is negative self-comparison. Instead of focusing on their own progress and development, people constantly compare themselves to others who are further along in their journey. They see someone who has more experience, better results, or greater recognition, and they conclude that they don't measure up. This comparison process is fundamentally flawed because it compares their behind-the-scenes reality with other people's highlight reels. They see the finished product of someone else's years of effort and compare it to their own beginning stages. They don't see the failures, struggles, and learning curve that preceded the success they're observing. They only see the gap between where they are and where others are, and they interpret this gap as evidence of their inadequacy. The second process that creates self-doubt is past-based identity formation. People look at their previous failures, mistakes, and disappointments, and use these experiences to define their capabilities. If they failed at a business venture, They conclude they're not cut out for entrepreneurship. If they struggled in a relationship, they decide they're not good at relationships. If they didn't excel academically, they believe they're not intelligent enough for certain pursuits. This process ignores the fact that past performance is not a predictor of future potential. Every failure contains lessons that make future success more likely. Every mistake develops judgment that prevents similar errors. Every struggle builds resilience that prepares you for greater challenges. But people who create their identity from their past failures trap themselves in cycles of self-limitation. The third process is future-focused catastrophizing. Instead of focusing on potential positive outcomes, people imagine everything that could go wrong. They visualize themselves failing, being rejected, or being embarrassed. They create detailed mental movies of worst-case scenarios and then react to these imagined failures as if they were real. This mental rehearsal of failure programs their subconscious mind to expect and create negative outcomes. Eliminating self-doubt requires systematically replacing these three destructive processes with empowering alternatives. Instead of comparing yourself to others, you must learn to compare yourself only to who you were yesterday. Progress is the only meaningful metric. Every day that you're slightly better than you were the day before, you're winning. Every skill you develop, every habit you improve, every fear you overcome represents genuine advancement regardless of what anyone else is doing. This shift from external to internal comparison immediately eliminates the source of most self-doubt. You're no longer at the mercy of other people's achievements or your perception of their success. Your confidence becomes based on your own growth trajectory rather than your position relative to others. You develop what psychologists call intrinsic motivation, where your drive comes from internal satisfaction rather than external validation. Instead of defining yourself by past failures, you must learn to define yourself by your capacity for growth. Your identity should not be based on what you've done. It should be based on what you're becoming. Every day, you're developing new capabilities, gaining new insights, and expanding your potential. Your past experiences, both positive and negative, are simply data points that inform your current decisions, not permanent limitations on your future possibilities. This growth-based identity creates what researchers call anti-fragility. Instead of being weakened by challenges and setbacks, you become stronger. Instead of seeing obstacles as threats, you see them as opportunities to develop resilience. Instead of fearing failure, you welcome it as feedback that accelerates your learning. Your confidence becomes based not on avoiding difficulties, but on your proven ability to overcome them. Instead of imagining failure, you must train yourself to visualize success. But this is not just wishful thinking or positive visualization. This is strategic mental rehearsal based on neuroscientific principles. When you repeatedly imagine yourself succeeding, taking confident action, and achieving your goals, you're literally creating neural pathways in your brain that make these outcomes more likely. Your brain cannot distinguish between a real experience and a vividly imagined one. When you mentally rehearse confident behavior, your brain develops the same neural patterns it would develop through actual confident behavior. When you visualize yourself succeeding, your subconscious mind begins to expect success and automatically looks for ways to make it happen. But visualization must be combined with action to be effective. You cannot just imagine confidence. You must practice confident behavior in real situations. You cannot just visualize success. You must take concrete steps toward your goals. The combination of mental rehearsal and physical practice creates compound effects that rapidly build genuine confidence. The most powerful confidence-building practice is what psychologists call graduated exposure. This means deliberately putting yourself in slightly uncomfortable situations that require confidence, starting with manageable challenges and gradually increasing the difficulty. Each time you act confidently despite feeling uncertain, you prove to yourself that confidence is a choice, not a feeling. If you want to build confidence in social situations, start by making eye contact and smiling at strangers, then progress to starting conversations with people you don't know well. If you want to build confidence in professional settings, start by speaking up in small meetings, then progress to presenting to larger groups. If you want to build confidence in creative pursuits, start by sharing your work with supportive friends, then progress to putting it in front of strangers. Every confident action you take, regardless of how small, builds evidence that you are someone who acts confidently. This evidence accumulates over time and becomes the foundation of unshakable self-confidence. You're no longer trying to convince yourself that you're confident. You have proof that you're someone who acts confidently regardless of how you feel. True confidence is not the absence of doubt. It's the ability to act powerfully in spite of doubt. Confident people feel uncertain just as often as anyone else. The difference is that they don't let uncertainty stop them from taking action. They understand that confidence is not a prerequisite for action. It's a result of action. The ultimate confidence system is built on one simple principle. You become confident by acting confidently, not by waiting to feel confident. Every time you choose courage over comfort, you build confidence. Every time you take action, despite uncertainty, you develop faith in your ability to handle whatever happens. Every time you persist through difficulties, you prove to yourself that you're stronger than you realized. This creates an upward spiral where confident actions lead to better results, which create more confidence, which leads to even bolder actions. Over time, acting confidently becomes so natural that you forget you ever struggled with self-doubt. Confidence stops being something you have to work at and becomes simply who you are. Chapter 8. The Focus Revolution. Mastering attention in a distracted world. In a world designed to steal your attention, the ability to focus deeply has become a superpower. While most people are drowning in distractions, constantly switching between tasks, and never giving their full attention to anything important, those who master focus are achieving extraordinary results with what seems like effortless ease. The harsh truth is that your ability to focus determines your ability to succeed at anything meaningful. You cannot build a business, master a skill, create meaningful relationships, or achieve any significant goal without the ability to concentrate deeply on what matters most. Yet most people have never learned to control their attention. They let external stimuli, internal thoughts, and emotional reactions determine where their mental energy goes. This attention crisis is not accidental. Every app on your phone, every website you visit, every piece of media you consume has been specifically designed by teams of neuroscientists and behavioral psychologists to capture and hold your attention. They use variable reward schedules, social validation mechanisms, and fear of missing out triggers to create addictive experiences that make it increasingly difficult for you to focus on anything else. The result is that most people's attention spans have been systematically destroyed. They can no longer read for extended periods, work on challenging tasks without checking their phones, or engage in deep conversations without mental wandering. They live in a constant state of partial attention, never fully present in any moment, never fully engaged with any task. But this crisis also creates an unprecedented opportunity. While everyone else is becoming more distracted, anyone who develops the ability to focus deeply gains an enormous competitive advantage. They can accomplish more in a few hours of focused work than others accomplish in entire days of scattered effort. They can develop expertise faster, solve problems more effectively, and create higher quality results in every area of life. Understanding how attention works is the first step to mastering it. Your attention is not unlimited. Research shows that you have a finite amount of focused attention available each day. And every time you switch between tasks, you lose some of that capacity. This is called attention residue, where part of your mind remains stuck on the previous task, even after you've moved on to something else. Most people unknowingly drain their attention capacity through constant task switching. They check email while working on projects, scroll social media while watching television, and think about personal problems while in professional meetings. They believe they're multitasking efficiently, but they're actually training their brains to be unfocused and scattered. The people who achieve extraordinary results understand that attention is like a laser beam. When focused intensely on a single point, it has tremendous power. When scattered across multiple points, it becomes weak and ineffective. They protect their attention like their most valuable resource because they understand that attention is the foundation of all achievement. Developing laser-like focus requires both external and internal strategies. Externally, you must design your environment to minimize distractions and maximize focus. This means turning off notifications on all devices during focused work periods. It means creating a dedicated workspace that signals to your brain that it's time to concentrate. It means removing tempting distractions from your immediate environment and making focused work as easy as possible. But external changes alone are not sufficient. You must also develop internal focus skills through deliberate practice. Your ability to concentrate is like a muscle that becomes stronger through training and weaker through neglect. Most people have weak focus muscles because they've never trained them systematically. The most effective focus training technique is what researchers call attention restoration practice. This means deliberately practicing sustained attention on a single object for extended periods. The traditional method is meditation, where you focus on your breath and gently return your attention to the breath whenever your mind wanders. But you can also practice focused attention by reading challenging books for extended periods, working on complex problems without interruption, or engaging in any activity that requires sustained concentration. The key is consistency and progressive overload. Start with short periods of focused attention and gradually increase the duration. If you can only focus for 5 minutes without distraction, start there and work up to 10 minutes, then 20, then an hour. Each time your mind wanders and you bring it back to your chosen focus, you're strengthening your attention muscles. Another crucial skill is learning to recognize and eliminate internal distractions. External distractions are obvious, but internal distractions are often invisible. These include worry about future events, rumination about past mistakes, self-doubt about your capabilities, and random thoughts that pull your attention away from your current task. Developing awareness of these internal distractions is the first step to managing them. When you notice your mind wandering to concerns, regrets, or irrelevant thoughts, you must gently but firmly redirect your attention to your chosen focus. This is not about suppressing thoughts or emotions. It's about consciously choosing where to direct your mental energy. The most advanced focus technique is what psychologists call flow state engineering. Flow is a state of complete absorption where you lose track of time. Your sense of self disappears, and you perform at your highest level. In flow, concentration becomes effortless because you're fully engaged with a challenging task that matches your skill level. You can deliberately create flow states by choosing tasks that are challenging enough to require your full attention, but not so difficult that they create anxiety. The task should have clear goals and immediate feedback, so you can adjust your performance in real time. You should eliminate all potential interruptions and give yourself enough time to get deeply absorbed in the work. Regular flow experiences train your brain to access deep focus states more easily. Over time, you develop the ability to drop into intense concentration quickly and maintain it for extended periods. Work that once felt difficult and draining becomes energizing and enjoyable because you're operating in your optimal performance zone. The ultimate goal is to develop what researchers call meta-attention, the ability to be aware of where your attention is going and consciously direct it toward your priorities. Most people are unconscious of their attention patterns. They let their minds wander randomly and wonder why they don't accomplish their goals. Developing meta-attention means becoming the CEO of your own mind. You decide what deserves your mental energy and what doesn't. You choose to focus deeply on activities that move you toward your goals and consciously ignore activities that don't serve your priorities. You become selective about what you allow into your mental space. This level of attention mastery creates what can only be described as mental superpowers. You can learn new skills faster because you can focus intensely on practice and instruction. You can solve complex problems more effectively because you can hold multiple variables in your mind simultaneously. You can create higher quality work because you can give your full creative energy to important projects. Most importantly, you reclaim control over your own mind. Instead of being pulled in random directions by external stimuli and internal impulses, you consciously direct your attention toward what matters most. You become the author of your own experience rather than a victim of circumstances and distractions. In a world where everyone else is scattered and distracted, your ability to focus deeply becomes your greatest competitive advantage. While others are consuming information, you're creating value. While others are busy being busy, you're accomplishing meaningful work. While others are overwhelmed by options, you're making progress on your priorities. Chapter 9. Emotional Mastery. How to control your feelings instead of being controlled by them. Your emotions are not your enemy, but they are not your master either. Most people live at the mercy of their emotional states, making decisions based on how they feel in the moment rather than what would serve their long-term interests. They act on anger and regret it later. They avoid opportunities because of fear. They procrastinate when they feel unmotivated. They let temporary emotions create permanent consequences. This emotional reactivity is one of the primary reasons people remain stuck in mediocrity. They cannot persist through difficult periods because they let discouragement stop them. They cannot take necessary risks because they let fear paralyze them. They cannot maintain discipline because they let their momentary feelings override their long-term commitments. The people who achieve extraordinary results have learned to maintain emotional equilibrium regardless of circumstances. They feel the same emotions as everyone else, but they don't let those emotions control their actions. They understand that emotions are temporary experiences not permanent realities. They know that feelings are information, not instructions. Developing emotional mastery begins with understanding what emotions actually are. Emotions are not mysterious forces that happen to you. They are predictable, physiological, and psychological responses created by your thoughts, beliefs, and interpretations of events. When you change how you think about a situation, you automatically change how you feel about it. This means you have far more control over your emotional state than you realize. You cannot directly control your emotions, but you can control the thoughts and interpretations that create your emotions. When you master your thinking, you master your emotional experience. The first step is developing emotional awareness. Most people are surprisingly unconscious of their emotional states. They react automatically without ever noticing what they're feeling or why they're feeling it. They might spend hours in anxiety, frustration, or discouragement without ever consciously recognizing these states or examining what's causing them. Emotional awareness means becoming an observer of your own emotional experience. Instead of being caught up in emotions, you learn to step back and notice them objectively. Instead of thinking, "I am angry," you learn to think, "I am experiencing anger." This subtle shift creates psychological distance between you and your emotions, giving you space to choose your response. The second step is emotional acceptance. What you resist persists. When you fight against negative emotions, judge yourself for having them, or try to suppress them, you actually make them stronger and more persistent. Emotions that are acknowledged and accepted tend to move through you quickly. Emotions that are resisted and fought against tend to get stuck and intensify. Emotional acceptance doesn't mean you have to like negative emotions or act on them. It simply means acknowledging that they're present without adding layers of judgment and resistance. When you feel afraid, you can accept that fear is present while still choosing to act courageously. When you feel discouraged, you can accept the discouragement while still choosing to persist toward your goals. The third step is emotional reframing. This is the most powerful emotional regulation technique because it addresses emotions at their source, your interpretation of events. Every emotion you experience is based on the meaning you assign to situations. Change the meaning, and you automatically change the emotion. For example, if you interpret a setback as evidence that you're not capable of success, you'll feel discouraged and hopeless. But if you interpret the same setback as valuable feedback that brings you closer to finding what works, you'll feel curious and motivated. The external event is identical, but your emotional response is completely different based on how you frame it. Developing reframing skills means consciously looking for empowering interpretations of challenging situations. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "How can this serve my growth?" Instead of thinking, "This is terrible," you ask, "What can I learn from this?" Instead of focusing on what you've lost, you focus on what you can gain. The fourth step is emotional leverage. Instead of trying to eliminate negative emotions, you can learn to use them as fuel for positive action. Anger can become determination. Frustration can become motivation. Fear can become excitement. Discouragement can become resolve. This requires changing your relationship with negative emotions from resistance to utilization. Instead of seeing difficult emotions as problems to solve, you see them as energy to channel. Instead of waiting for negative emotions to go away before taking action, you take action because of the emotional energy they provide. Many of the greatest achievements in history were fueled by negative emotions that were channeled constructively. People who were told they weren't good enough used that doubt as motivation to prove others wrong. People who experienced significant losses used their grief as determination to prevent others from experiencing similar pain. People who felt fear about their future used that fear as energy to create greater security. The fifth step is emotional conditioning. Just as you can train your body through physical exercise, you can train your emotional responses through deliberate practice. Every time you choose to respond to a situation differently than your automatic emotional reaction, you're strengthening new neural pathways and weakening old ones. If you habitually respond to stress with anxiety, you can practice responding with calm curiosity instead. If you typically react to criticism with defensiveness, you can practice responding with openness and gratitude. If you usually feel overwhelmed by challenges, you can practice feeling excited about opportunities for growth. This conditioning process requires consistency and patience. Emotional patterns that took years to develop won't change overnight. But with persistent practice, you can literally rewire your brain to default to more empowering emotional responses. Over time, what once required conscious effort becomes automatic. The sixth step is emotional intelligence in relationships. Your emotional mastery affects not only your individual performance, but also your ability to influence and connect with others. People with high emotional intelligence can read other people's emotional states accurately, respond appropriately to different emotional situations, and create emotional safety that allows others to perform at their best. This skill is particularly important in leadership roles, but it's valuable in all relationships. When you can remain emotionally stable while others are reactive, you become a calming influence that others naturally gravitate toward. When you can acknowledge and validate other people's emotions without being controlled by them, you build deeper trust and connection. The ultimate goal of emotional mastery is not to eliminate emotions, but to become their conscious director rather than their unconscious victim. You want to feel emotions fully when they serve you and regulate them skillfully when they don't. You want to use emotional energy to fuel positive action, rather than letting it drain your energy through rumination and reactivity. This level of emotional mastery creates tremendous personal power. You no longer avoid situations because they might make you feel uncomfortable. You no longer postpone important actions because you don't feel motivated. You no longer let other people's emotional states determine your own emotional experience. Instead, you become emotionally anti-fragile. Challenging situations make you stronger rather than weaker. Difficult emotions provide energy rather than drain it. Other people's negativity bounces off you rather than affecting you. You maintain your center regardless of what's happening around you. Most importantly, you gain the freedom to choose your responses based on wisdom rather than impulse. You can act in alignment with your values and long-term goals regardless of your momentary emotional state. You become someone who can be counted on to respond thoughtfully rather than react emotionally. This emotional mastery becomes the foundation for every other area of success. When you're no longer at the mercy of your emotions, you can persist through any challenge, take any necessary risk, and maintain discipline toward any goal. Your emotions become your allies rather than your obstacles. Chapter 10. The Discipline Code. Building unshakable self-control. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. It's the force that turns intentions into actions, plans into results, and dreams into reality. Yet most people have a completely backwards understanding of what discipline actually is and how to develop it. Most people think discipline is about forcing yourself to do things you don't want to do through sheer willpower. They believe disciplined people have some special ability to push through discomfort and resistance that others lack. They see discipline as a personality trait that some people are born with and others aren't. This understanding is not only wrong, it's counterproductive. When people try to build discipline through willpower alone, they inevitably fail because willpower is a limited resource that gets depleted throughout the day. When people believe discipline is a fixed trait, they give up trying to develop it because they think they either have it or they don't. True discipline is not about willpower or personality. It's about systems, habits, and psychological strategies that make the right actions feel automatic rather than forced. Disciplined people are not constantly battling against their impulses. They've structured their lives so that disciplined behavior feels natural and effortless. Understanding this distinction is crucial because it means anyone can develop extraordinary discipline regardless of their current level of self-control. You don't need to be born with special willpower. You don't need to suffer through constant internal battles. You need to understand how discipline actually works and apply proven systems that make it inevitable. The foundation of true discipline is what psychologists call implementation intentions. Instead of relying on motivation to determine when and how you'll take action, you pre-decide exactly what you'll do in specific situations. Instead of hoping you'll feel like exercising, you decide, I will exercise at 6 a.m. in my home gym for 45 minutes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Instead of planning to work on your business when you have time, you decide, I will work on my business from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. every weekday in my office, with my phone in another room. This pre-decision process removes the mental energy required to make choices in the moment. When 6 a.m. arrives, you don't debate whether to exercise. You've already decided, so you simply execute. When 7 p.m. comes, you don't wonder if you feel like working on your business. The decision was made in advance, so you just begin. The second element of systematic discipline is environmental design. Your environment is constantly influencing your behavior, either making disciplined choices easier or harder. Most people try to build discipline while surrounded by temptations and distractions, then wonder why their willpower fails. Disciplined people understand that environment is stronger than motivation. They design their physical space to make good choices obvious and bad choices difficult. If they want to read more, they put books in prominent places and hide their television remote. If they want to eat healthier, they stock their kitchen with nutritious foods and remove junk food. If they want to focus on important work, they create a distraction-free workspace and leave their phone in another room. This is not about having perfect willpower. It's about making willpower unnecessary. When your environment is properly designed, the disciplined choice becomes the path of least resistance. You're not constantly fighting against temptation. You're working with your natural tendencies to create better outcomes. The third element is what researchers call habit stacking. Instead of trying to build discipline through isolated acts of willpower, you connect new disciplined behaviors to existing habits that are already automatic. This leverages the psychological momentum of established routines to make new behaviors feel natural. For example, if you already have an established morning routine of drinking coffee, you might stack a new habit of reviewing your daily priorities right after you pour your coffee. If you already have a habit of checking your phone when you wake up, you might stack a new habit of doing 10 push-ups before you're allowed to look at your phone. The existing habit becomes the trigger for the new disciplined behavior. This approach works because it uses existing neural pathways rather than trying to create entirely new ones. Your brain already has strong connections associated with your current habits. By linking new behaviors to these existing connections, you make the new behaviors much easier to maintain. The fourth element is progressive overload. Just like building physical strength requires gradually increasing resistance, building discipline requires gradually increasing the difficulty of your self-control challenges. Most people try to change everything at once, which overwhelms their capacity and leads to failure. Disciplined people start with small, manageable commitments and gradually expand them. If they want to wake up early, they might start by waking up just 15 minutes earlier than usual and gradually work their way to their target time. If they want to exercise regularly, they might start with just 10 minutes a day and gradually increase the duration and intensity. This progressive approach builds confidence and capability simultaneously. Each small success proves that you can follow through on commitments, which makes larger commitments feel more achievable. Each challenge you overcome increases your capacity to handle bigger challenges. The fifth element is what psychologists call implementation monitoring. This means tracking your disciplined behaviors consistently so you can see your progress and identify areas for improvement. What gets measured gets managed. When you track your discipline, you become more conscious of your choices and more motivated to maintain your standards. The tracking doesn't need to be complicated. A simple checklist or habit tracker that shows whether you completed your disciplined actions each day is sufficient. The key is consistency. When you see a streak of successful days, you'll be motivated to maintain it. When you see gaps in your consistency, you can analyze what went wrong and adjust your approach. The sixth element is understanding the relationship between discipline and identity. Every disciplined action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become. When you exercise even when you don't feel like it, you're voting for the identity of someone who prioritizes health. When you work on your goals even when you're tired, you're voting for the identity of someone who follows through on commitments. Over time, these votes accumulate into a new self-image. You stop seeing yourself as someone who struggles with discipline and start seeing yourself as someone who consistently does what they say they'll do. This identity shift makes discipline feel natural rather than forced because you're acting in alignment with who you believe you are. The most important thing to understand is that discipline is not about perfection, it's about consistency. You don't need to be disciplined 100% of the time to get extraordinary results. You need to be disciplined enough of the time that your positive actions compound into significant outcomes. Disciplined people fail regularly. The difference is that they get back on track quickly, instead of using failure as an excuse to give up entirely. When they miss a workout, they make sure to exercise the next day. When they eat something unhealthy, they return to their nutrition plan immediately. When they procrastinate on an important task, they refocus and get back to work. This resilience is built into their system from the beginning. They expect that there will be days when discipline feels harder, and they have strategies for getting back on track. They don't judge themselves harshly for occasional failures because they understand that discipline is a practice, not a performance. True discipline creates a powerful upward spiral in your life. When you consistently follow through on commitments to yourself, you develop deep self-trust. When you have self-trust, you're willing to set bigger goals because you believe in your ability to achieve them. When you achieve bigger goals, your confidence grows, which makes even greater achievements feel possible. This is why disciplined people often seem to accomplish impossible things. They're not superhuman. They've simply built systems that make extraordinary achievements inevitable. They've removed the friction from taking action, created environments that support their goals, and developed identities that make success feel natural. The discipline code is not about suffering or deprivation. It's about creating freedom through structure. When you have systems that automatically generate the right actions, you're free from constant decision-making and willpower battles. When you have habits that align with your goals, you make progress effortlessly. When you have an identity built on following through, you trust yourself to handle any challenge. Chapter 11. Mental Toughness. Building an Unbreakable Mindset. The reason most people fail isn't because they're not smart enough or lack resources. It's because they are mentally weak. The moment things get hard, they crumble. When they face obstacles, they quit. When they don't see immediate results, they get discouraged and stop trying. Look around you. Most people aren't living the lives they want. They're settling, struggling, making excuses for why they haven't achieved their goals. But every successful person you admire has faced hardships, setbacks, and pain. The difference is they didn't break. They didn't let their emotions control them. They didn't let fear stop them or failure define them. Mental toughness isn't something you're born with. It's something you build. But most people never develop it because they make 3 deadly mistakes that destroy their ability to succeed before they even start. First, they avoid hardship instead of embracing it. The average person wants life to be easy. They want instant success, instant gratification, instant results. But nothing great comes without struggle. Growth only happens through pain. The strongest people aren't those who had the easiest lives. They're the ones who went through hell and kept going. Second, they let their feelings control their actions. Most people only take action when they feel like it. If they're tired, they sleep in. If they're unmotivated, they procrastinate. If something is uncomfortable, they quit. But your feelings don't matter. Success doesn't care if you're tired, stressed, or scared. The only thing that matters is what you do despite those feelings. Third, they break under pressure instead of rising to it. When things go wrong, the weak complain, make excuses, blame circumstances. The mentally tough take ownership. They don't waste time feeling sorry for themselves. They see every challenge as a test, and they pass that test by showing up and doing the work no matter what. To develop an unbreakable mindset, you need to train yourself to handle pain without complaining. Pain is inevitable, but how you respond to it is a choice. Weak people complain, whine, and feel sorry for themselves. Tough people embrace pain because they know it's making them stronger. Next time you feel discomfort, train yourself to lean into it instead of running away. You must control your thoughts, or they will control you. Your mind is your most powerful tool, but it can also be your greatest enemy. The thoughts you allow in your head determine your actions, confidence, and success. If you constantly tell yourself, "I can't do this, I'm not good enough," this is too hard. You are programming yourself to fail. Take control of your internal dialogue. When a negative thought enters your mind, replace it with a powerful one. I don't quit when it's hard. I thrive in challenges. I am in control of my emotions, not the other way around. No matter what happens, I find a way to win. Rewire your brain to expect success. Put yourself in difficult situations on purpose. If you always avoid discomfort, you will always be weak. The only way to become mentally strong is to intentionally expose yourself to difficulty. Train yourself to do hard things every single day. Take cold showers. Push your body in workouts. Work longer hours than you feel like. Wake up early when you want to sleep in. Every time you overcome discomfort, you build mental armor. Mental toughness is about training your mind to see obstacles as opportunities, challenges as stepping stones, and resistance as a sign that you are growing. The question is no longer, can you do this? The question is, will you fight for the person you are meant to become? Chapter 12. The Compound Effect of Mental Discipline. What if everything you've been taught about success is wrong? That the people who achieve the highest levels of greatness don't get there through huge dramatic changes overnight, but through something much simpler and more subtle that most people ignore? Most people believe success comes from massive action, from taking huge leaps, from working harder than everyone else all at once. They look for shortcuts, quick fixes, and instant solutions. They want to change their entire life in 30 days, lose 50 pounds in a month, or build $1 million business in a year. But the real secret to success is the 1% rule. If you improve by just 1% every single day, the results over time will be exponential. That tiny effort, that small push, that slight improvement compounds and builds on itself until you are light years ahead of everyone else. Here's the problem. Most people never apply this rule. They do something for a few days, don't see progress, and quit. They get impatient and abandon the process just when it's about to pay off. That's why they fail, because success isn't about what you do once. It's about what you do every single day without fail. Look at people who set New Year's resolutions. They start off strong, hitting the gym every day, working on their goals obsessively. But within a few weeks, they burn out. Why? Because they relied on motivation instead of habits. They tried to do too much too soon instead of focusing on tiny, consistent gains. Compare that to someone who commits to just 1% improvement every day. Maybe they only work out for 5 minutes on day one. Maybe they read just 1 page of a book. Maybe they practice their skill for just 10 minutes. It doesn't seem like much, but the difference is they do it every single day without fail. After 1 year, they are 37 times better than when they started. After 2 years, they are hundreds of times better. After 5 years, they are unrecognizable. This is the power of compounding improvement. The people who dominate their fields don't become great overnight. They build their skills little by little, day after day, until they reach a level most people can't even comprehend. To apply the 1% rule, pick one area to improve and focus obsessively on it. Don't try to change everything at once. Set a daily minimum action so small that it's impossible to fail. If you want to read more, commit to just 1 page a day. If you want to get fit, start with 5 push-ups. If you want to write a book, aim for 50 words daily. Track your progress and stay consistent. Focus on consistency over intensity. Never break the chain. Treat it like brushing your teeth. It's just part of your daily life. Once you've built momentum, you can increase the challenge slightly. But always prioritize showing up over perfect performance. The compound effect works because small actions, repeated consistently, create massive changes over time. While others are looking for shortcuts, you're building unshakable foundations. While others are trying to change everything overnight, you're making steady progress that accumulates into extraordinary results. Chapter 13. Reprogramming your subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind is running your life, and most of the time, it's running it in directions you don't want to go. Every belief you have about yourself, every automatic reaction you have to challenges, every habit you can't seem to break, it's all controlled by subconscious programming that was installed years ago without your permission. This programming was created by everything you experienced growing up, every word spoken to you, every emotion you witnessed, every belief system you were exposed to got recorded in your subconscious and became your mental operating system. By adulthood, this programming is so deeply embedded that you mistake it for your true identity. But here's what most people don't realize. You can reprogram your subconscious mind. You can overwrite the limiting beliefs, eliminate the negative patterns, and install new programming that automatically moves you toward your goals instead of away from them. Your subconscious mind communicates through repetition, emotion, and visualization. It doesn't understand logic or reasoning. It only responds to consistent messages that are delivered with strong feeling and clear mental images. This is why willpower and positive thinking alone don't work. You're trying to use conscious mind tools to change subconscious programming. The most powerful reprogramming technique is combining affirmations with visualization and intense emotion. But these aren't the weak, wishful thinking affirmations most people use. These are specific, present-tense statements that describe exactly who you are becoming, combined with vivid mental movies of yourself living that reality. Instead of saying, "I hope I'll be successful someday," you say, "I am completely confident in my abilities. I take bold action toward my goals every day. I persist through every challenge until I succeed." You say this while visualizing yourself acting with total confidence, taking bold actions, and achieving your goals. You generate intense feelings of excitement, gratitude, and certainty as you do this. The key is repetition and consistency. Your subconscious mind learns through pattern recognition. When you feed it the same empowering messages consistently, it begins to accept them as truth and starts looking for ways to make them reality. But this process takes time. Most people give up after a few days or weeks because they don't see immediate changes. You must also align your actions with your new programming. You can't just visualize confidence. You must practice confident behavior. You can't just affirm success. You must take successful actions. The combination of mental programming and physical practice creates compound effects that rapidly transform your reality. Another powerful technique is what psychologists call future self-visualization. Every day, spend time mentally stepping into the version of yourself who has already achieved your goals. See through their eyes, feel their emotions, experience their confidence and certainty. Your brain cannot distinguish between real and vividly imagined experiences, so this mental rehearsal literally prepares your nervous system for success. You must also eliminate negative programming by becoming conscious of limiting beliefs and replacing them immediately. Every time you catch yourself thinking, "I'm not good enough," "I can't do this," or "this won't work," you must consciously choose a different thought. This interrupts the old pattern and strengthens new neural pathways. The most important thing to understand is that your current reality is not your permanent reality. Every limitation you experience exists only in your programming, not in your actual potential. When you change your internal programming, your external results change automatically. Chapter 14. The Power of Strategic Thinking. While most people are reacting to whatever happens to them, elite performers are thinking several moves ahead. They're not just responding to current circumstances, they're strategically positioning themselves for future opportunities. They understand that success is not random. It's the predictable result of strategic thinking combined with consistent execution. Strategic thinking means looking beyond immediate problems to long-term solutions. It means considering not just what you want to achieve, but how achieving it will position you for even greater achievements. It means making decisions based on where you want to be years from now, not just how you feel today. Most people think tactically, not strategically. They focus on solving immediate problems without considering how their solutions affect their long-term position. They make decisions based on short-term comfort rather than long-term advantage. They react to opportunities rather than creating them. Strategic thinkers operate differently. They spend time analyzing trends, identifying patterns, and predicting where opportunities will emerge. They position themselves in growing markets rather than declining ones. They develop skills that will be more valuable in the future, not just useful today. They build relationships with people who are moving in the direction they want to go. The foundation of strategic thinking is what military strategists call situational awareness. This means constantly scanning your environment for changes, opportunities, and threats that others might miss. Most people are so focused on their daily tasks that they don't notice important shifts happening around them. Strategic thinkers also understand leverage. They look for ways to multiply their efforts rather than just working harder. They invest time in activities that create compound returns. They build systems that generate results without requiring their constant attention. They delegate tasks that others can do, so they can focus on things only they can do. Another key element is scenario planning. Instead of hoping everything will go according to plan, strategic thinkers prepare for multiple possibilities. They ask, what if this doesn't work? And how will I respond if conditions change? This preparation allows them to adapt quickly when circumstances shift, rather than being caught off guard. Strategic thinking also requires patience. While others are chasing immediate results, strategic thinkers are willing to invest time and energy in activities that may not pay off for months or years. They understand that the biggest advantages come from playing long-term games that others won't play. The most important strategic thinking skill is the ability to see connections that others miss. Strategic thinkers look for patterns across different industries, time periods, and situations. They apply lessons from one area to solve problems in another. They synthesize information from multiple sources to generate insights that give them competitive advantages. To develop strategic thinking, you must regularly step back from daily operations to analyze your position and plan your next moves. Schedule time for strategic reflection where you're not solving immediate problems but thinking about long-term positioning. Study successful people in your field and identify the strategic principles behind their success. Most importantly, you must be willing to make decisions that seem irrational in the short term but position you for long-term success. Strategic thinking often requires sacrificing immediate gratification for future advantage. But this temporary sacrifice is what creates the extraordinary results that separate elite performers from everyone else. Chapter 15. Becoming Unstoppable. The final transformation. You now possess the knowledge that separates the top 1% from everyone else. You understand how your mind works, how to control your thoughts and emotions, how to build unshakable discipline, and how to think strategically about your future. But knowledge without application is worthless. The question now is, what will you do with what you've learned? Most people will do nothing. They'll listen to this information, feel inspired for a few days, and then gradually return to their old patterns. They'll make excuses about why they can't apply these principles. They'll wait for perfect conditions that never come. They'll let their fears and doubts convince them to stay comfortable rather than grow. But you are not most people. You're here because you're ready to break free from the limitations that have held you back. You're here because you refuse to accept mediocrity as your permanent reality. You're here because you know you're capable of extraordinary things if you're willing to do what others won't do. The transformation from where you are now to where you want to be requires one fundamental shift. You must stop being someone who learns about success and become someone who creates success. You must stop being a consumer of information and become a producer of results. You must stop waiting for the perfect moment and start taking imperfect action. This transformation begins with a decision, not a hope, not a wish, not a goal, but a decision. A decision is different because it closes off all other possibilities. When you truly decide to master your mind, you stop debating whether you'll do the work. When you decide to become disciplined, you stop negotiating with yourself about following through on commitments. When you decide to succeed, you stop accepting excuses for why you can't. The decision must be followed by immediate action. Your brain needs proof that this time is different. Take one concept from what you've learned and implement it today. Choose one mental pattern you want to change and start changing it now. Select one discipline you want to develop and begin practicing it immediately. But understand that this is not a 30-day challenge or a temporary experiment. This is a permanent upgrade to how you operate. You're not trying these techniques to see if they work. You're committing to them because you know they work. And you're willing to persist until you see results. The path ahead will not be easy. Your old patterns will resist change. Your environment will try to pull you back to familiar behaviors. Other people may not understand or support your transformation. There will be days when you don't feel motivated, when progress seems slow, when you question whether the effort is worth it. This is where most people quit. They expect change to be linear and immediate. When they hit resistance, they interpret it as evidence that they're not cut out for success. But resistance is not a sign that you should quit. It's a sign that you're breaking through old limitations and creating new possibilities. Every moment of resistance you push through makes you stronger. Every time you choose growth over comfort, you expand your capacity for greater achievements. Every day you maintain your new patterns. You're literally rewiring your brain to support the person you're becoming. The compound effect of these daily choices will transform not just your results, but your entire identity. You'll stop seeing yourself as someone who struggles with discipline and start seeing yourself as someone who consistently follows through. You'll stop identifying with your limitations and start identifying with your potential. You'll stop being impressed by other people's success and start creating your own. Most importantly, you'll develop unshakable inner confidence that comes from knowing you can handle whatever challenges arise. You'll trust yourself to persist through difficulties because you'll have proof of your mental strength. You'll take on bigger challenges because you'll know you have the tools to overcome them. This is not about becoming perfect. This is about becoming unstoppable. Perfect people don't exist, but unstoppable people do. They're the ones who get back up every time they fall. They're the ones who find a way when others find excuses. They're the ones who persist when others quit. The choice is yours. You can go back to your old patterns and hope things change on their own. Or you can start today, right now. implementing what you've learned, and becoming the person you know you're capable of being. Your future self is waiting for you to make that choice. The time for preparation is over. The time for transformation is now. Everything you need is already within you. The only question remaining is, are you ready to use it?